Thanks a lot for this nice introduction. I'm very happy to have the chance to present joint work with Gian Andrea Monch from Force, also in Switzerland. It's really work in progress, so any comments at the end are very much welcome. And as you already mentioned, we focus on compatibility of family and work during the lockdown in Switzerland. And I think we have already discussed a little bit the issue of gender inequality and how COVID might have affected this yesterday. However, I want to give you a very brief introduction into how Switzerland functions. So even before the COVID, you could say that reconciliation of family and work was quite a challenge for many parents, particularly women, which is very supportive in terms of generous childcare or generous leave policies. It differs by cantons, but what you could say is preferred is this kind of male breadwinner and female part-time worker. So in terms of how does now COVID might have an effect of gender equality and the division of tasks within families, I think with the closure of daycare and schools and also the reduced employment, of course, there have been this upcoming question, what might be the effect on gender equality? And if I look at the current literature, which is more and more emerging with respect to COVID and gender, we can see two scenarios coming up. So one is positive, saying this is an option. So this is an option for men and in particular fathers to engage more in different types of care work or household tasks, whereas the negative scenario is more concerned with respect to this will add burden to women and in particular mothers, because and actually also reinforce, let's say, the traditional division of tasks among the partners. So what I will be using is data from the Force COVID-19 Mosaic study. It's a panel of three waves. I will use data of the first lockdown time. We are currently in the field with the second one, and in spring 2021 we will have our third and final wave. It's a probability-based web survey, and for the first wave we had roughly 15 minutes for 4 different areas, and I will only talk about one of those areas. For the final analysis, I'm using roughly 1,900 participants, and I will use the weighted data. The research questions are kind of rather descriptive at the moment, so we are planning to do more analytical kind of descriptions, not descriptions, but analysis in a later stage when we also have the second wave. However, what I wanted to show you here is a first exploration on how did the lockdown affect the reconciliation. Does it differ between women and men, mothers and fathers, and who was affected the most? And what are the consequences of the lockdown on family conflict and family satisfaction? Because this was also discussed in media quite extensively in our file. Does this also mean that conflicts within families increased during this time? Regarding our results, what was the effect? It's not surprisingly that 75% of our respondents who have children reported that no external childcare was available. And for those who had still some possibilities, it was rather for a shorter time period. If you see that before it was 25 to nearly 4 days a week. In addition to the childcare, which increased tremendously, what we also saw that for 51% of our respondents, additional care burden emerged because of relatives outside the household. And here, this was in particular shouldered by women and single parent households. And if it comes now to the interesting questions of what did actually change with respect to childcare tasks and household tasks, interestingly, 50% of our respondents actually reported no change at all. This was in particular high for household tasks, where nearly 70% reported actually nothing has changed tremendously. I will come to the change in a minute. In relation to this is, of course, also an observation that people adapted their work behavior. I mean, of course, things shut down, but a lot was done online. But what we could observe is that women reduced their working time significantly more than men. However, we didn't see any differences when it comes and without children or in comparison between mothers and non-mothers. So coming now to the changes, which is much more interesting and related to what the scenarios I described before, we actually saw 2 trends emerging. So on the one hand, we saw that people reported an increase in care tasks, whereas around 25% of our respondents actually reported that the partner actually does more than before the COVID crisis. And here also interesting gender differences and gender similarities emerged, because if we zoom in into those who reported that actually the partner does more. We saw a concurrence that men reported, yes, I actually do more in terms of childcare and also housework. And this was actually backed up by women who also reported at the same time, yes, my partner does more in comparison to the pre-COVID period. And you can see that the share is not so small. So around 31% of men reported, and it was 28% of women who reported that the partner does actually do more.
Stephanie,
but at
you
the
have a minute and a half remaining.
Yes, I'm nearly done. So actually also at the same time, we saw that 20% of the women and in particular mothers reported that there is an increase in childcare and also household tasks. So in that respect, we have no clear indication that actually it only went down in terms of mothers have been more bothered, but we really see two trends emerging. Regarding the issue with partner conflict, what we saw is that for the majority of our respondents, and here we have a differentiation by gender, we have a differentiation by household type and by income type of the household. Generally, what you can see, and this is the big blue area here, nothing has changed at all. Some even reported the conflict decreased. However, for some of the respondents also, we see clearly that there was an increase in conflicts. And also this is probably not surprising, in particular in households with kids. We have around 18% of those households who report an increase in conflict. And in particular for single parent families, there seems to be a strong increase in family and partner conflicts. When it comes to the satisfaction, what we found very striking is, even so we see that nothing has changed and in some areas the conflict has increased, the satisfaction and also the task division remains at a very high level, and this is really across all of the groups. So okay, coming now to the end. Yeah, I'm on my final slide. So in conclusion, even so this is rather descriptive, what we see is that Swiss couples and families mastered the lockdown quite well. We see little change in task division and conflicts, rather a high satisfaction with remained during the lockdown. However, challenges emerged for particular groups, in particular single parents and families. And here we could already see that women and mothers have shouldered some of the burdens. We see that they reduce their working time, and we see that in particular they have this external care burden, which they have to shoulder in addition. I said changes, at least for some couples, we can report that men and fathers were more involved. However, this is of course the question, is that a long-term kind of consequence, or is this a long-term trend, which we have to study in our next wave, which will come up in October in more detail. Thanks a lot.